This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with your host, Vicki Davis.
Are you looking for amazing professional development in the new year? Today's sponsor is Edge U Badges from Forward Edge. Stay tuned at the show's end to learn how these powerful micro-credentials can help you with your accreditation needs and for a discount coupon code for a premium account. Now, on with the show. Episode 826. 28 questions to ask yourself as you plan your year. Sir Anthony J. says the uncreative mind can spot wrong answers, but it takes a creative mind to spot wrong questions. As we start a new year, each of us has different circumstances. One size fits all does not work. Have you found some people spend more time planning spring break than planning their lives? So I like to be intentional about how I plan my year. So in this podcast, I've compiled 28 questions to help you plan the upcoming year. And I also have some forms and materials that I've created that I'm sharing at COOLCATteacher.com/annual plan that you can download and use for free. In a fantastic press conference after their win in their bowl game in Tampa, my alma mater, Georgia Tech, one of the players, said something that was spot on. He said, the only thing you can do with the past is to learn from it. And the only thing you can do with the future is to prepare for it. So in each area of life, I take a look at the past to learn from it. And then I have preparations for how I prepare for the future. Because honestly, sometimes we don't know. I actually went through some of this process in 2020. And as we all know, by March, the plan just went out the window and everything changed. But I still think it's a worthwhile process as I think about things. So the first category I start with is days. Now, a lot of people start with goals, but I do not. And I will get to goals, show you how I get there here in just a minute. Sir Isaac Pittman said, well-arranged time is the surest mark of a well-arranged mind. So before we plan, we need to learn from our past. I have two forms you can use as you do this process. So first, I look at every month on my calendar for this past year, and I ask myself, question number 1, what went right? So remember, this is an observation. So I want to mention one of my best books of the year, John Acuff's All It Takes Is a Goal. He wrote about creating your best moments list. Now, right now is not the time for that, but that is a great thing to start doing because you will start realizing if you keep a list of your best moments that they're not necessarily planned, but they just happen upon you when you're in the yard or when you're with a family member or you're just in the right place at the right time. And so a lot of my planning has to do with creating opportunities for those best moments. So pick up that book if you're interested. But then I look at the year and I ask myself a question. Question number 2. I got this from Michael Hyatt when I went through 5 Days to Your Best Year Ever course about 10 years ago. Question 2, as I look at each month of this past year, is what was missing. Remember, you might not have something for every single month. Then I enter preparation mode and I look at my days. So this is where you might start thinking about goals, but I'm not quite there yet. So I have a spreadsheet for you called Annual Plan. I have 2 copies. One has a macro in it that will print a summary sheet for you. That's pretty cool. But if you don't like to enable macros in Excel or your work has turned that feature off, then download the regular spreadsheet and print the copy with the blanks or just print individual pages. So I'm not going to get too deep into the spreadsheet because it has instructions in it, but I am going to share in this podcast the questions that I ask using the spreadsheet. So what I like to do is look at the big picture of how I spend my days this upcoming year. So 365 days. It's going to be a little different than you because I work at school, but I also work writing books, creating podcasts, and writing about awesome technology for you. So when you open the spreadsheet called Annual Plan, you'll see the steps at the bottom and just follow those. John Maxwell says at the beginning of each month, he reviews his travel plans, plans his family time, and he reviews his projects and blocks off time for thinking, writing, working, and meeting people, as well as the fun things. Well, I try to do that every month, but this annual plan is something I do each year to look at the big picture of things because some things take more than a month to plan. So then I start with question 3 and I say, what am I planned days off? This includes weekends, holidays, and vacations. So I take off every Sunday, and I like to take off one Saturday a month from working on the blog and podcast as well as school. If I don't know when the vacations are, I estimate when they'll be and set aside some days, and I talk to my husband about that. So I might try to take 2 or 3 days a year to spend time with my dad or take a few times a year and do something with my sisters. So I might just have sister vacation and have 3 days or dad vacation and have 2 days or 3 days, something like that. So then my question number 4 is how many days will I be working this year? And at that, I literally count how how many days I have of school that year. So I don't have the annual calendar for the fall yet, but I do split it up by semester. So I counted how many days I'll be teaching class as well as professional development, and then the number of days I plan to go in over the summer to school. And I kind of give a rough estimate of those because it could change. So then I moved to question 5, and that is what I call the passion category. So my creative bucket or passion category is the COOLCAT teacher work that I do. And you'll list the major category that you spend time in if you use the spreadsheet. It could be a hobby, a business, a club, or activity, something you like to work at doing. If you're a coach, it might be that. When I had young kids, my children were that category. Question 5 is, how many days will I work on my passion this year? When I say day, that's like a full day dedicated to that activity. So I split this up by major tasks. I know I'm going to spend 1 day a month on administrative tasks and bookkeeping. So I'll set aside 12 days a year for that. I also set aside 1 or 2 days for final bookkeeping and taxes, both personally and for COOLCAT teacher. So then we get to a vital place here. Selwyn Hughes says, you don't grow old, you get old by not growing. The category where the magic happens is the growth category. Babe Ruth said, yesterday's home runs don't win today's game. So while learning is something I do twice a week in small 15-minute chunks in my Innovate Like a Turtle habit, I'm talking about larger blocks of time for learning. So question 6 is, what skills do I need to improve so that I can grow and improve in my chosen field? There's some fascinating 2004 research from Acevedo and Crowley, which demonstrated that once students receive as little as half an hour on self-regulated learning, that those students outperform students who did not receive the training. So since reading that research some time ago, I set specific learning goals for myself. So it's not just learn something new, it's spend a day learning about formative assessment. And so for me, a day, I would consider 8 hours. Question 7 is, what learning goals do I need to set for this year? And again, I set those specifically. Additionally, I set creative goals. In their book, Art and Fear, David Bales and Ted Orland talk about an experiment done by a ceramics teacher. 1/2 of the students were told to produce 1 excellent piece of pottery. Only 1 could they submit, and they could get an A if it was a high quality piece. The other half of the class was graded on quantity. So the other half of the students, if they had 50 pounds of pottery, they received an A, 40 pounds, they got a B, and so forth. So John Maxwell said, oddly, it became apparent that the highest quality work was coming from the quantity group. He goes on to say, it seems that while the quantity group was busy churning out piles of work and learning from their mistakes, the quality group was theorizing about perfection, and in the end had little more to show for their efforts than grandiose theories and a pile of dead clay. Now, we can learn about that. We can sit around and talk about the perfect lesson plan, or we can really start cranking those lesson plans out and analyzing and figuring out how we want to improve them. So let's look at Thomas Edison. His goal was to have 1 major invention every 6 months and 1 minor invention every 10 days. And when he died, he had 1,093 U.S. patents and 2,000 foreign patents. So he was pressing himself to create more and more in his area of expertise. He was failing quickly, he was failing fast, but he was also learning fast and producing very high quality work. So question 7 is, what am I producing? And how can I produce more of it so I can learn rapidly while still committing to excellence? So all of these go into my growth days plan. Remember, you can't do this with everything. You have to choose your passion. Then I take all this information and evaluate how I'm looking at my year. My spreadsheet shows me how many days I have left in the year that are unaccounted for. And then I start evaluating. Tolkien, in his book, The Hobbit, said, it does not do to leave a live dragon out of your calculations if you live near him. So this leads to question 8. How will I plan for the unexpected? Face it, we work with kids, we work in schools, and there be dragons, whether it's getting sick or life events or weddings or funerals or plans with friends. I always go back and give myself a cushion. So next, as we move forward, I start making hard decisions about my year, because there have been years that I have done this process where I started running out of days. I start making hard decisions about my year, and I start looking at goals. So often I know my goals, and as I build my spreadsheet, I build them in. However, sometimes I have something I want to do, and now I have to make hard decisions. Question 9. Are there any major goals I'd like to add to my plan for this year? Legendary Russian actor and director Konstantin Stanislavski, I believe I'm saying that correctly. Sorry if I'm not, to my Russian friends out there. He had questions for character development, but I like to apply those to my goals. What do I want? Why do I want it? What will happen if I don't get it now? What happens if I do get it now? What must I overcome? So this leads to question 10. What am I willing to give up in order to pursue this goal? Now, it would be easy to say, hey, I'll just stop looking at Facebook, but I'm talking about the big commitments that are taking time. So now I go back to my annual plan and I start getting serious about how I'm going to spend my time. I say yes to some things, and that means saying no to others. So I get that rough plan, and then I'm going to continue by asking myself some more questions. William Shakespeare said, no legacy is so rich as honesty. Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird said, before I can live with other folks, I've got to live with myself. The one thing that doesn't abide by majority rule is a person's conscience. There is a gap between knowing what I want to do and doing it. And sometimes the biggest obstacle for me is my own attitude. Dr. Douglas Spears said, with advancing years, our greatest danger is not the hardening of the arteries, but the hardening of the attitudes. For question 10, I go through and I say, how is my attitude about blank? I ask this question about work. How is my attitude about work? Exercise, my husband, my boss, my home, my blog, my finances, my pets. I mean, I go through all of the things. I might even get specific and say, how's my attitude about my office? Or I try to identify, the things that are basically driving me crazy or that I'm having trouble with. And when I see an attitude problem, a genuine attitude problem, something that if it happens, I just start griping immediately. Then I ask another question. Question 11, if I have a bad attitude about something, what needs to happen about this? Are things I need to learn, steps I need to take, relationships that need to be mended, or what action needs to be taken? So now I look at the problems and situations I deal with in my life. I ask myself question 12. What are the 20% of the issues in my life that are giving me 80% of the problems? And then I rank the issues in order. I always pick what's my biggest issue in the classroom. What's my biggest issue for a COOLCAT teacher? What's my biggest issue with housekeeping or cleaning? And just look at those areas of my life. And then I ask myself question 13. What needs to change in my life to tackle those problems? Again, I can't tackle all the problems at once, but when I identify attitude issues that point to problems to handle, I will go back and adjust my big picture planning spreadsheet. Now, I want to note here that the book Crucial Conversations and also Necessary Endings are books that have helped me a great deal in this area when I had big picture issues to tackle and needed to talk to other people about them. One big thing, sometimes it's not the problem. If everywhere you go, you have the same problem, I'm sorry to tell you this, but the problem is you. And if everywhere I go, I have the same problem, the problem is me. This doesn't mean that we're hopeless. It means that changing our scenery isn't going to change our problem because we're taking our problem with us. And the problem, my friend, is us. When I realize that I have problems that keep cropping up with different people and in different workplaces, that I need to read books, take courses, go to counseling, or find some help in that area so that the problem can be reduced or minimized. If a student keeps struggling with taking tests, for example, they can learn test anxiety skills. They can read books. They can do courses to help them learn how to study. There is no reason to marinate in failure. William Saroyan, the novelist, said, good people are good because they have come to wisdom through failure. We get very little wisdom from success, Helen Keller said, character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experiences of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, ambition inspired, and success achieved. So question 14 is what needs to change about me so I can learn from my past mistakes and become a better, more wise, more effective person and human being. And I think this is just part of being honest with ourselves. This takes us into legacy, easily into this next question, which I got from Michael Hyatt. Question 15, how do I want to be remembered? And then that leads to another important question. Before we create our to-do list, we should create our to-be list. Question 16 is who do I want to be? How do I want to behave? And then I make a to-be list. Now, it's important to remember, for example, when as a teacher, if I become unkind or snippy with my students, that learning in the classroom shuts down. Our students notice how we treat other students. And when we have a classroom with a lot of anxiety or upsetting behavior, then that can create a classroom where it's harder to learn. We all have those classrooms, and this is not an easy thing. But I do know what I want to be. So I want to be respectful. It means I have to pace myself and get plenty of rest. I want to be kind. I want to be rested. Then question 17 is what is important to me? It is a myth that you can do it all. You can do anything you want, but not everything you want. Here's another question. 18, what is distracting me? Whatever gets our attention gets us. Now, some people don't know that you can delete a social media app on your phone without deleting the account. Make sure you know your username and password. Reset your password if you have to, and then you can delete the app off your phone. What I do is I then check it on my desktop and then get rid of the distractions so I can focus. So with these legacy questions in mind, I now go back to my annual planning spreadsheet and I see what needs to change. If I have overscheduled myself, I'm going to be crabby. I'm not going to be a happy person, and it's going to be tough. Now we're looking at daily habits. So I should have my year all set, and I start working on my workflow and habits. John Dryden, the English poet and author from the 1600s, says we first make our habits, and then our habits make us. A 2006 Duke University study said that 40% of our actions aren't decisions, but habits. So question 19, what good habits worked well this past year? Question 20, what bad habits need to be changed or replaced with good ones? Question 21, what routines need to happen in order to reach the target I'm aiming for? Question 22, what bad habits will keep me from hitting the target? Question 23, what wisdom do I need to seek on a routine basis as I take this journey to form better habits and remove the bad ones? So this is a key area that will shape your life. I highly recommend books like Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit, Atomic Habits by James Clear. I would also mention that looking at habits for your morning routine, your routine when you get to school, and routine when getting home are all areas to focus. George Washington Carver spent every morning in the woods, and he said that led a lot to how he lived his life so effectively. Additionally, look at workflow by reading books like Work Clean by Dan Charnas and Building Your Second Brain by Tiago Forte. I do a whole podcast on workflow and the mud puddle principle and all these things, but right now we're just asking those questions. And stop making excuses. In his 2015 article, New Harvard Research Reveals a Fun Way to Be Successful, Sean Akers says, when you look at the outliers on the graph, you find people who actually break the tyranny of genes and environment by creating the conscious positive habits that actually cause them to interact with life in a more positive way with higher levels of success, lower levels of stress, and higher levels of resilience. They do it by changing their mindset and changing their habits. And by doing so, they actually trump their genes. Relationships. We become who we hang around. We can't choose our family, but we can choose our key relationships in many areas of life. Just remember that, as Dr. Charles Lowry said, people need love when they least deserve it. So I'm always for showing up on the hardest days for people. I never need an explanation. I just want to be there. This reminds me of one of the greatest decisions of my life, which happened during a planning time just like this one. In my 30s, when I realized that while I lived in the same hometown with my parents, I never saw them. So I worked it out with my husband that every Saturday morning from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. that I would go over to my mom and dad's house. The kids were small, so sometimes it meant Kip had to get up early. But as the kids got older, they just knew what I was doing. They knew I'd go to see mom and dad, and then I'd go to the grocery store and then come home. As I record this on December 30th, this is the third anniversary of the day that I held Mama's hand as she took her last breath. And I'm thankful to God that I spent all those years seeing her on Saturdays and did not wait. I have given myself the gift of no regrets. Now remember, the only thing you can do with the past is learn from it. We don't need to marinate in our regrets. The only thing you can do with the future is prepare for it. So question 24 is, who are the key people in my life I need to make time for? Question 25, how do we spend our money last year? And I think all schools should ask this question because I saw an EdWeek article in 2022 quoted a November 2019 study that said 1 billion in EdTech licenses go unused and only 16% of licenses are fully used by schools. So this also applies to us. How many subscriptions do we have? And all these things that need to be canceled. So I usually put a day on my growth plan to shrink our expenses. So additionally, I also look not just expenses, but at investing and saving for the future. Question 26, how do we want to spend our money differently this year? Now, I'm going to come to an obnoxious question. Ernest Hemingway said, all stories have continued far enough, end in death. Again, I'm going to repeat. Ernest Hemingway said, all stories, if continued far enough, end in death. And he is no true storyteller who would keep that from you. The death rate is 100% last time I checked. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, said, we are always complaining that our days are few and acting as though there would be no end of them. There's an old story I can't seem to locate in my files, but I'll tell it anyway, about an elder British statesman who was approached by a young man. The young man approached him and said, I need some advice. I'm planning on going to college and becoming a lawyer. And the statesman said, what's next? He said, well, I guess I'll get married and have children. The statesman said, what's next? He said, well, I'll travel the world and hopefully see my children get married and grow up and go to a good college and get good jobs. The statesman said, what's next? He said, well, maybe I'll become a grandfather and I'll retire and see the world. The elder statesman said, "What's next?" The young man said, "Well, I hope I can grow old with the woman of my dreams." And the elder statesman said, "What's next?" And he said, "Well, I guess I'll die." And the elder statesman said, "What's next?" The man said, "Well, I don't know." And the statesman said, "You're a foolish young man. If you don't know what's next, you don't know how to live now." So question 27 is, what do I think about death and what happens after this life? And am I solid that what I believe is the truth? Now, I am not going to be sharing right now my own personal beliefs, but I do know that I have settled in my heart, mind, and soul about what's next after death. And I would not be any kind of person encouraging you to live your life if I didn't encourage you to think about what's next after life. You need to investigate that, and you need to find the truth and seek that out. So I could go on and ask other questions, but here's the one I'll end with, which is question 28. How will I evaluate my progress and know when to reset and regroup? So as we embark on this new year, what's next for you? Are you looking at the past and learning? Are you looking to the future and preparing? The links to materials on this post can be found at COOLCATteacher.com/annual plan. I am working on a book now about my planning and productivity system. And so if you sign up for that email list about the book release, I'll send you a copy of these spreadsheets and the forms to do your own annual planning. Can I tell you thank you for listening to the 10-Minute Teacher and for letting your friends know about the show? It is a blessing that you listen to the show and for all the amazing guests who've been on the show. I look forward to another year of the 10-Minute Teacher in 2024. We just surpassed 7 million downloads, and this is episode 826. Thank you so much for supporting the show and our amazing sponsors who make it possible for me to create them. Happy 2024, dear friends. The present is a gift, so open it wisely. As I work to keep up my personal licensing, I'm looking at Forward Edge and their Edge U Badges program. You can earn contact hours or graduate credit through this fantastic program. In this program, you earn micro-credentials for submitting tasks and learning content. Edge U Badges has former teachers review every single badge within 1 to 3 business days of submission, and no badge is ever denied without very specific feedback on what you and I can do to resubmit successfully, as well as the positive feedback we need on successful submissions. While classroom teachers like me and you are the primary beneficiary of this flexible, useful system of Edge Badges, everyone from administrative assistants to administrators will find this helpful. This program has the ISTE Seal of Alignment, and Edge Badges will work with you to help your district accept your transcript for licensure renewal hours. I've been looking for micro-credentialing that works and have finally found it. I'm so excited about this program of Edge Badges from Forward Edge. So check them out at COOLCATteacher.com/edge. and use the coupon code COOLCAT for $20 off a premium account. That's COOLCATteacher.com/edge and use the coupon code COOLCAT for your discount. Let's learn in personalized ways that work for us. And that's what you'll get at Edge Badges.
You've been listening to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. If you want more content from Vicki Davis, you can find her on Facebook, X.com, TikTok, Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, and YouTube at COOLCAT Teacher. Thank you for listening.